Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Dr. Nasser, and today I'm going to follow up on a presentation about the theory of biology. I have been asked a few questions, and the first question that I was asked was simply, well, what makes a theory of biology so different? And why is it so radical? Why is it that everything that the theory of biology says is completely opposite or in reverse to the current state of biology and the standard picture of biology that we read about in our standard textbooks? Well, let me introduce you to a new concept if you haven't heard it before, and it will radically change everything about biology. And I will demonstrate to you today how it actually does that. So let's talk about the way that we study biology in general. Biology in general is studied by looking at the organism from the outside in. So that's a normal approach. We look at the physicality of the organism, how it interacts with the outside world, how it feeds and breathes, etc. And we then begin to go a bit deeper into its physiology, structure, function, etc., and then further down into the cellular level, where we study cellular function and form and cell division and even cellular activity. And of course, we go into the biochemistry and basically look at the biochemical reactions that actually generate energy and protein synthesis, photosynthesis, etc. And finally, this is where we end up when we study the organism. We normally then begin to talk about its genetics. What really is the controlling factor of all physiological processes in the cell and in the organism? So we look at the genetics, the DNA. We look at the genes involved in characterizing its features, which include all the biochemistry, all the physiology, all the structure. So everything about the organism is dictated upon by the DNA, ultimately. So if we look at it in reverse, and that's exactly what I've done in terms of the theory of biology, in that I am looking at it from inside out. So I'm reversing the way that I'm looking at the actual biology. So why is that important? Well, it's all to do with the function of DNA. But not only that, you see, the DNA appeared first on the scene of life. So obviously, just with that, knowing that, the DNA must have undergone some survival problems and challenges that it had to overcome. So if life emerged from the DNA, then obviously the DNA was responsible for producing this first cell, ultimately later biodiversity, and all these beautiful ecosystems that we have around the world. So I wanted to find out how crucial DNA survival was, well, to life itself. And that is how I began, starting with the DNA that appeared some 4 billion years ago. And of course, I wanted to look at the journey that it took all this time. By following this kind of approach, I realized that I was discovering new things. And as Einstein once said, if you repeat the same thing over and over, it's insane to expect a different result. So by changing the actual approach to the study of biology and life, we will discover new things. And that is exactly how the theory of biology was actually put together and proposed. Now, we're going to move on to the next part, which is all about, specifically, we're going to look at what were the challenges that the DNA had to overcome. Because, you see, we've overlooked one very important point in the evolutionary history, in the timeline of life itself, and that is the pivotal moment. And this is crucial, and I can't stress how important it is, because the DNA had to survive. It's as simple as that. And It is a genetic material, a double helical structure. It's not stable enough to self-replicate in a medium of water in the primordial soup. It had to be encapsulated, and that's the first challenge that it had. And it was encapsulated by vesicle, fatty acid layered vesicle, and it developed its own cell. You see, there were no cells at the time when the DNA was conceived. No cell at all. And we know that genetic materials, they all need a cell, a living host, in order to survive. Now, it had to also develop mechanisms for its own replication. Otherwise, it would have just died off like everything else would do. The law of entropy applies here. So the DNA was encapsulated. It somehow, from its genetic code, developed its own mechanism to self-replicate and to keep the cell alive itself by having processes that can generate energy from an outside source, by maintaining its integrity. And that is another story for another day. The most important and crucial point to this discussion today is its DNA survival and how it led to a step-by-step strategic implementation of certain survival mechanisms. The survival of the DNA was crucial at the beginning of life. If it didn't survive, if it didn't deploy these very clever and innovative ways, then there would be no life as we see it today. It's as simple as that. So let's briefly have a look at some of the steps that the DNA had to undergo. First one, as I mentioned, was encapsulation, followed by cell division. After the DNA replication, it needed another cell to place the copy, the new copy, into. Now, cell division is a very important part of the survival. The DNA's aim, or ultimate aim, is to survive ad infinitum. In other words, it's trying to achieve immortality. And in order to do that, it needs to make more copies of itself and then disperse these copies inside a living host across the world by a process of biodiversity, so that these new organisms that house the copies of DNA can survive in that environment, in that habitat. That means the DNA had to deploy the mechanism of adaptation. You see, all this can happen as a result of random and chance events. But as far as theory of biology is concerned, it is unlikely. The probability of that happening is very, very low. So that means that we are introducing a new concept into the mix. We are introducing a possible awareness of the DNA, of itself, of its environment, and what it had to do in order to survive. But not just to survive. And this is the other crucial bit to the whole theory of biology. It is also crucially important for the preservation of life. And everything that we have today is a result of all those endeavors, all those challenges, all those innovative steps. And they are as follows: DNA encapsulation, DNA replication, cell division, cell dispersion, adaptation of the new cells to the new environment, evolution, evolving into new species, biodiversity, and the formation of ecosystems. Now, if you look at what's happened from one single copy of DNA, today we have 8.7 million different species, and within every species there are colonies and copies of DNA, the original DNA, in their trillions upon trillions upon trillions. Now, if a calamity was to hit Earth, anything, you think of anything, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's tornadoes, whether it's a meteorite attack, whether it's a flood, whether it's a freeze over, it doesn't matter what it is. The chances of survival of a DNA in a single complete cell is very high. And life will start all over again, just like it did 4 billion years ago. And I think that's a remarkable achievement that the DNA has done. We should give it a round of applause. This is absolutely amazing what the DNA has done. The DNA has achieved its goal. It is now virtually immortal. I hope that's been interesting for you. I look forward to seeing you again. There's more videos, so please look out for this channel, and I look forward to seeing you again. Bye for now.